All right, guys, let me give you a little scenario. Let's say you took your kids to Disney World, okay? Get back from Disney World. It was a great trip. You had a great vacation. And then one of your friends says, I don't think you actually went to Disney World. Did you go to Disney World? And you said, yeah, of course, I went to Disney World. And he says, would you swear on the Bible that you took your kids to Disney World? You'd probably say, yeah, you're being pretty weird, but I would swear on the Bible and say I took my kids to Disney World. You probably wouldn't punch them in the face because you would just think they're being weird. It's a very strange thing when you talk about the topic of the moon landing to see people get so incensed over it. I realize this. I've never been a person that believed in the moon landing. It's always just felt a little foolish to me. Talking on the moon, yeah, here we are. I don't know, in 1969, we had basically nothing technologically, and then we sort of just stopped going after a period of years during which our government really wanted to distract us from some stuff that they were doing overseas. I don't know. I'm not a big believer in it. I'm not saying you're required to stop believing in it, but I am going to require you to think, because my next guest knows a little bit of something about how angry people get on this topic, because he himself was punched in the face by Buzz Aldrin when he walked up to him and asked him if he would put his hand on the Bible and swear that he went to the moon. He got socked pretty hard. His name is Bart Sibrel, and we are so excited to have him joining us today. Welcome to Candace. You know, Bart, I feel like the first thing that we have to ask you, since we've got you on the Candace podcast, is what is it's like to be punched in the face by an astronaut?
Well, he's got really good reflexes. I didn't see it coming. He's got a good punch. It knocked me back, and it gave me a toothache for about 3 years. And
No way.
yes, and then someone said, why didn't you sue him? And I thought, to be quite honest, I thought about it. But it's amazing how everything is in the ancient text, which says, if someone strikes you on one cheek, offer them the other one. I thought, rats. So
you
I didn't.
absolutely must take my audience to the lead up of this moment. Like the person, everyone's heard the story, like someone who went up to Buzz Aldrin with a Bible and said, put your hand on the Bible. Did you guys go to the moon? And instead of getting an answer, he got punched in the face, which I feel like if I went to the moon, I would just be like, yes, we did, and put my hand on the Bible. I don't think I would get violent. So
Yeah.
what is your side of the story?
Well, we had first produced A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. This is a $1 million film financed by a board member of an aerospace company who built rockets for NASA, who knows that the moon landings are fake, thought it was his patriotic duty to expose it. He gave us $1 million to produce
Wow.
A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. I grew up as the biggest fan of the moon landings. I mean, a fanboy. I had a shrine of Apollo 11 pictures in my bedroom. I was 4 years old at the time, and they followed me wherever I went. But I had an open mind. And I met a guy who worked at NASA who said it never happened. I'm thinking, oh, I never thought about that. And when I became a filmmaker whose job is to make fake scenes look real, I'm like, these are definitely shot with electrical lighting. It's pretty easy to prove that that's the case. And so I was producing the film under the theory it might be true that they faked it. And the film took 7 years to produce. It's a 45-minute film. It's on the homepage of Sibrel.com. You can see it for free. And halfway into this project, mind you, I'm meticulous. I spent 4,000 hours editing a 45-minute film. That's 40 hours a week for 2 years just to edit the movie. Halfway into the film, you see, the way I looked at it, Candace, is if they faked the moon landing, they're more likely to have made a mistake the first time they faked it. So I asked NASA, as a journalist, I'm doing a documentary about the moon landings, which was true, and send me everything you got just from the first moon mission, figuring if they made a mistake, they're more likely to have made it the first time because they had never faked it before. So I meticulously went through everything, and there's very little footage. There's only like 20 pictures of an astronaut on the moon in the first mission. And you get the same footage over and over again. Well, my source at NASA believes a whistleblower sent me a tape. I pop it in. It says, do not show to the public on the screen. And they're faking being halfway to the moon, dated 2 days into the flight. All the astronauts are on camera, and they're using a 1-foot model that to make it look like the Earth's floating in space, and they're looking back at it from a distance. They never left Earth orbit. And what a surprise, 55 years later, they still cannot leave Earth orbit. That's why there's mannequins orbiting the moon. So I'm like, oh my gosh, they really did fake the moon landing. How sad is that?
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Okay, Roger. We're dropping in on Earth.
Okay, so what we're seeing here on the right-hand side is allegedly the Earth floating in space. But in fact, that is a circular window of the spacecraft. You can kind of see the thickness there at the bottom. And they've moved the camera at the back of the spacecraft and they turned out all the lights, and you're seeing part of the Earth outside of a circular window. But it looks like the Earth floating in space from a distance. And this is the footage that we uncovered that proves that they never left Earth orbit, because there it is right out the window, and they're faking being halfway to the moon. They allegedly have the lens at the window's glass to shoot the tiny Earth far away. But when we show the final clip, you'll see that the camera's at the back of the spacecraft. All these segments we got were unedited. They only showed about 10 seconds of this to the public. That's why it says do not show to the public at the beginning of this unedited reel. Now, what you just heard, and you can play it again, is the talk, is because they're in Earth orbit, only a couple of hundred miles above the Earth, they would have an instantaneous conversation with NASA. Like, I might say, hello, how are you? They would say, I'm doing fine. How are you? I'm doing okay. But they're supposed to be halfway to the moon or 136,000 miles away. So what they did is they faked a 4-second radio delay, as if it took 2 seconds to go out to them and 2 seconds for the radio transmission to come back. So what you hear, if you want to play it again, is you hear NASA saying the TV picture looks great.
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over.
There are 4 seconds of dead air. And now you'll hear the CIA prompting them to speak after the 4 seconds.
Okay, Roger. We're dropping in on Earth.
So we actually have a third track of hidden audio of the CIA telling them not to speak until 4 seconds go by to create this fake radio delay. Now, if you go to the next clip, this is where Neil Armstrong lied.
Hi, Roger. Houston, Apollo 11. Calling in from about 130,000 miles out.
Yeah, so go ahead and freeze it there. So he just lied. This is the part that's in all the NASA reels. He claims he's halfway to the moon, but what you're seeing is really a circular window of the spacecraft with the camera back. If that were really the Earth floating in space, the lens would have to be at the glass, right? But it's actually at the back of the spacecraft. All the lights are off, and you're seeing a circular window in the foreground, outside of which is completely filled with the Earth and low Earth orbit. They even insert a little crescent piece of material into the window to make it look like the Terminator line between night and day. Now, if you go to 3913, and of course, all this is viewable on the homepage of Sabrell.com, you'll see the outtake. Go ahead and play this. And this is the part that really gets you. You can dim down the audio if you want. So basically, this is the outtake. We have the unedited reel. That's why it said don't show to the public at the beginning. And here they are removing part of the transparency in front of the window and part of the special effect. That's a work light inside of the spacecraft. And then the lights come up and you see that they're in Earth orbit all the time. And we're using a 1-foot model of the Earth using the circular window to fake being halfway to the moon. So you see, that was the circular window the entire time. So you can play that again.
Wow.
It's really remarkable. And so we have them faking being halfway to the moon. See, he just claimed a moment ago that this was 130,000 miles out, but we have the unedited reel. It's very convincing, but that's the window. That's Michael Collins moving stuff away from in front of the window to set up for an interior shot. That's a work light. The camera has been at the back of the spacecraft the entire time, and then they open up the iris, and you can see the very bright and near Earth out the window, but it's dated 2 days into the flight where they're supposed to be halfway to the moon. They showed that other clip of him claiming they were 130,000 miles out, but they're still in Earth orbit. And Candace, you said, wow, that's exactly what I said. And that's exactly what an audience, when I've shown this to many people in theaters, they gasp, they say, wow, because
Mm.
that's them faking being halfway to the moon. So if they really went to the moon, why would they be faking any of it? So after the first film came out, which has that footage in it, even my critics agree that that is them faking being halfway to the moon, which they would never have to do if they could really go halfway to the moon, right? So I had this idea maybe from childhood TV programs, take an oath in court or whatever. Why not just track down the astronauts and ask them to swear on a Bible whether they walked on the moon or not? And the second film, which is also on the homepage of Sabrel.com, called Astronauts Gone Wild, one astronaut, yeah, one astronaut kicks me, one astronaut threatens to punch me, one astronaut threatens to shoot me, and we even left a hot microphone accidentally in an astronaut's house after he assaulted me. And the camera guy, so, disoriented, he forgets to hit stop recording. So while the astronaut and his son are in their house with the door closed, we're recording the audio by wireless microphone in the back seat of the rental car in the driveway. And they say, word for word, do you want to call the CIA and have them whacked?
You want to call the CIA? Have them whacked?
So like
Oh
I
my
said,
goodness.
yeah.
That
So like
is crazy.
well, like I said, if I'm some silly person who thinks the moon landings are fake and they really went, why would the CIA be involved? But I have proof that they didn't go, classified footage and an eyewitness. That's why the CIA is involved. And I go into my book, me being literally kidnapped at the back door of CNN, trying to get somebody the tape by the government, drugging me with truth serum, vomiting, telling them everything they wanted to know, escaping, peeing in a cup, taking it to a lab, and the lab was broken into and my urine sample was stolen. All that is in the book.
So you're saying that there was more between the CIA and you, aside from them saying, should I have that guy whacked after Buzz Aldrin punched you in the face?
Yeah, a lot more. I never went into it during interviews prior to the book coming out, but basically, when I found the secret footage that night, I was followed from church. I ended up looping around and following the person following me, pulled up alongside of him to get a look at him, and apparently they zapped my car. All the electricity, everything just shut off automatically, and I coasted to a stop out in the middle of the highway at 9, 10 o'clock at night. I'm literally being chased on foot by 2 to 4 people. I hail a cab who takes me to a safe house where I have a copy of the tape. I get it to the back door of CNN, where I'm surrounded by government agents who take the tape. They drug me with what I presume is truth serum to the point of vomiting. They have a clipboard ready. They ask me all these questions like, where's the original and blah, blah, blah. I escape their custody. I make my way back to Nashville. I pee in a cup. I give it to a friend to put in his name in the lab, trying to outwit the CIA. And days later, when we meet to get the lab result, because I told the NBC News director, I'm going to get him. I got proof I got this exotic drug in me. You know what I mean? That they illegally injected me with. And so he says, well, there was a problem at the lab. And I'm like, well, what problem? He says, well, funny thing, they had a break-in over the weekend. I'm like, yes, so what? He says, well, funny thing, the only thing stolen was your urine sample. And the people at the lab are like, we don't know who you are, but take your business elsewhere. And so all of these bizarre escapades, I go into detail in a chapter called The Funny Thing Happened on the Way to CNN, and A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to Church. Go into great detail that I never did before because it's already a hard pill to swallow that, they faked the moon landing, but they did. And seeing how this is the final statement from me for the historical record until the truth comes out, then I thought, well, why not put it all in the book? And so it goes into great detail, my harassment by the government, the
Mhm.
death threat on audio, the literally, being followed from church, ch- chased on foot, abducted illegally out the back door of CNN,
Mhm.
drugged, proof that I was drugged, being broken into in a lab. You can imagine a lab. They know they had a break in, and then they check the inventory, no computers, no documents, but one urine sample stolen from Bart Sabrell.
Mm.
That had the truth
Mm.
serum in it that I was gonna prove that they had drugged me because only the CIA would have this particular type of drug, and I guess
Right,
maybe the
and
drug's a
interestingly
secret,
enough,
I don't
I've been
know.
telling my viewers to read the book Chaos, and it goes into depth about Dr. Jolly West and the chase to create a truth serum, which they admitted they were successful in creating a truth serum
Oh,
to
I
get
told them
people
everything they
to.
wanted to know and don't even remember question beyond question 3, and so maybe the drug itself is a secret, and they didn't want
Yeah.
that getting out, I don't know. Now, if they really went to the moon, and I'm some silly person who thinks it was shot at Cannon Air Force Base, which we have proof of, then why would the CIA be involved? And all that, Candace, to answer your question, if I walked on the moon and some person thought otherwise, I would find that hysterically funny. A
Yeah.
sword with no point causes no injury. It would be like throwing a feather at him. But what it was like walking up to him in front of his wife and saying, "Oh, your mistress says hello." You see, he's angry because it's truthful. And that's, what you see in Astronauts Gone Wild.
All right, guys, taking a moment to remind you about Preborn, because every baby's life is a precious gift full of potential and dreams that are waiting to unfold. That's why Preborn, the nation's largest pro-life organization, is on the front lines for at-risk babies and mothers that are facing unplanned pregnancies. Preborn's network of clinics are positioned in the highest abortion rate areas in the country. They're equipping these clinics with the resources they need to save these precious lives and provide compassionate support to mothers for up to 2 years after birth. As abortion continues to rise, Preborn is expanding their life-affirming care to help more hurting women and save more lives. If you have the means, please consider a leadership gift to save babies in a very big way. A tax-deductible donation of $15,000 will place an ultrasound machine in a women's center, saving countless lives for years to come. And now, Preborn will match your gift, doubling the donation amount. To donate, dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. Again, that's pound 250 baby. Or you can donate securely at preborn.com/Candace. Again, that's preborn.com/Candace. I actually want to talk about anger and overreaction being an indicator that a lie is being told, because what's really funny is my experience is I just kind of I always thought it just seemed really fake and weird. And obviously, I'm born in 1989, so it's 20 years after the fact. We learned about it really as a blip in school. It feels, at least when you're first learning about it, like very inconsequential, like what a fun conspiracy theory. And one day I tweeted, what's one conspiracy theory that gets you? And I said, for me, it's the moon landing. I just really don't think it happened. Share, some ones that you think that are funny. And the overreaction to that tweet, and you brought up Bill Maher, he starts getting angry about, like, the media got angry, like, how dare you question the moon landings? And I went, okay, your reaction to this is now making me believe that there's something there. Because if we went to the moon and someone said, I don't believe we went to the moon, who cares? If I say, which I did, I went to Dollywood the other weekend with my kids, and you say, Candace, I don't believe you, I'd be like, okay. I went. I don't know what else to say. I don't really, it's not really care. I don't care if you don't believe me or you don't believe me. I actually went. And if you said, Candace, put your hand on the Bible and swear that you went to Dollywood with your kids, I'd be like, this is weird, but okay. I swear I went to Dollywood with my kids. I wouldn't punch you in the face. I wouldn't get angry. And so this is where I think the media really miscalculates, because they get so rabid and so angry and defensive of things that aren't actually real. And so this led me to go, actually, let me look further into the moon landing. And when I looked into it, I went, oh, this just absolutely did not happen. So I had not realized that you had gotten access because there was just this NASA whistleblower who was like, hey, man, we didn't go here. And it's interesting to see how the astronauts are not really able, after they go, to answer basic questions about what they experienced out. You're in outer space. You're the first person to walk the moon, and they seem so uncomfortable in interviews.
Yeah, there's a famous quote. It says, the likelihood of one individual being right increases in direct proportion to the intensity to which others are trying to prove him wrong. The fact that it gets this juvenile reaction as if I'm blaspheming their God is proof that we're
Yes.
correct, believe it or not. Because if they really went, why would they care? You type in Google moon landing fraud, you don't get moon landing fraud. You get 1,000 videos to reassure people that the moon landings are real. Well, why do they need to reassure us? Reassure us. I mean, if I went around saying Mickey Mouse was the first president of the United States, do you think there would be 1,000 videos to reassure people that it was George Washington? They have to prop it up because it's made of straw. They
Right.
didn't go. I was the biggest fan of it. And if I can admit reluctantly that they faked it, and people don't realize what this means, it's so profound. I mean, imagine this, Candace. Imagine they really did go to the moon and come back. Boy, that was a close one. Or they lied about it to the whole world. They embezzled an equivalent of $250 billion. They printed it on coins, on stamps, in the encyclopedia, and gave them medals of honor for being such good liars. And according to people I've interviewed, relatives of dead astronauts who were murdered by the CIA, their opinion, not mine. If that's true, which sadly it is, that is so much more profound than if they actually went. So what we have is one of the greatest events in human history is the faking of the moon landing
Mm.
by the most powerful nation on earth, and people don't realize how easy it was to fake. It's like whoever killed JFK, he's still dead. It's a tragedy. Whoever did 9/11, they're still dead. It's a tragedy. You can change the hats on who did it and why. This is different. This is a positive lie. You see? And I come along wanting to take away that candy and give them the reality of manure, and they don't want it. I got an email just a few days ago from someone who knew Carl Sagan. And he said that Carl Sagan privately but knew that the moon landings were fake, but he wanted to be politically correct. So before he died, he wrote this about the moon landing fraud indirectly. Carl Sagan said, "One of the saddest lessons of history is this. If we've been bamboozled or lied to long enough, we tend to reject any evidence of the bamboozle. We're no longer interested in finding out the truth. The bamboozle, the lie, has captured us. It's simply too painful to acknowledge, even to ourselves, that we've been taken. Once you give a charlatan power over you, you almost never get it back." And then I don't know you that well at all, if you'll forgive me, but I get the impression you believe in God, right?
Hmm.
Okay, so what we have at the beginning of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, we show the Tower of Babel, which according to Genesis 6 was built to show off. We're going to make a name for ourselves. It was never finished. The Messiah said, if you start a tower and don't finish it, you're a fool to the whole world. Then the biggest machine ever built in the technological age, the Titanic, put in print the ship that God Himself could not sink. Tower of Babel never finished. Titanic never made one voyage. And then Richard Nixon, who knew they were not on the moon, said putting a man on the moon is second in greatness only to God making the universe. You
Wow.
see that? This is a blasphemous event. How ironic in a fallen world that the most powerful nation on earth ends up being one of the most corrupt, and the greatest accomplishment is a complete fraud. The most published female writer in the world, Ellen White, about the Tower of Babel, said the following, that if the truth comes out about the moon landing, and it might, could be true about that as well. She said the monument to their pride became a memorial to their folly. Imagine if the truth comes out. And we have an eyewitness, which we can talk about, who saw them film the fake moon landing at Cannon Air Force Base and confessed so as he was dying.
Wow. I definitely do want to talk about that. And there's a lot of things that you said there, and I want to go over them slowly. So one of the things that I stumbled across quite accidentally, actually, I was looking into Aleister Crowley and, sort of this satanic cult and their belief that they could conquer the seven nations. He had this vision that he could conquer the seven nations and be the beast. after he was reading Revelations in the Bible. And, he begins this cult is the only way to describe it. And Jack Parsons, who was the founder of the Apollo program, people don't know this, that he was a part of this sex cult, and that in order to establish the Apollo program, this is on Wikipedia. We are not in conspiracy land right now. We covered this on my show, The Origins of NASA. It's so sinister. It's so satanic. And one of the things that they believed was that they could summon demons via these sex rituals that they were having out in California. I believe in Devil's Canyon. Like they believed that he could summon devils. And he said that he did summon a devil, and that program was successful, and that they were going to, according to Jack Parsons, that they were going to create via sex magic a moon baby, a moon child. This is, again, available on Wikipedia. Jack Parsons, and the religion that they established, which was called Thelema. And then he took it even further, and he was considered the protege of Aleister Crowley. And I go, okay, so you're telling me the guy who began the Apollo program believed that he had a vision that was given to him by the devil, that he could produce a moon child. And then we're told, but he never got this Virgin Mary, this like satanic Virgin Mary, this woman with red hair that came and stumbled upon this sex ritual house, that he never got her pregnant, or that she got pregnant and she got a miscarriage. This is, again, all available on Wikipedia. It's very scary to learn about Jack Parsons. And I'm going, so I'm supposed to trust this person with having established this program and think that this program is entirely legitimate, and their expressed interest was in conquering the nations, right? In conquering the nations. My issue that I came up against when I was in my own mind going, I don't believe the moon landing happened. I've read this piece. It seems all ridiculous. The problem is I wasn't alive during that time. So you need somebody to walk you through how ridiculous it really was I was going, but why? Like, why would they do this? And like you said, the implications would be profound. And the answer to that came to me actually when I was speaking to a guy about Ashton Forbes, about MH370 and the idea of government hiding technology. He said something along the lines of, if the base assumptions are wrong, right? If you are telling everybody that, the Earth's a globe, or you're telling everybody that E equals MC squared, whatever the base assumption is that you establish, if everyone's working off of that and saying, well, this is now concrete, this is consensus, this is a fact, then you're actually putting a ceiling on science, right? So if you're the makers of the world and you're powerful and you're Freemasons, which many of these people were, and you're telling everybody that, the Earth looks this way, or this is how the atmosphere works, or this is what it looks like when you're 250,000 miles away from the Earth's surface, and everybody's working off of that model, you're actually keeping the entire population dumber than you. And I went, now that's really fascinating, because I do believe that they told this lie, and their anger in maintaining this lie signals to me that the lie has to do with control. Like, that's the only reason you would be that angry. You're executing some sort of control over humanity via this lie.
Well, yes. I find it hard to believe the evil things that I hear take place in the world, from child molestation or murder or genocide. I find it hard to believe, but the longer I live, the more wicked the world really is. The world has been conquered by evil people thousands of years ago. When the Messiah was being tempted by Lucifer, the fallen angel, he said if the Messiah would worship Lucifer, that he'd give him all the kingdoms of the world because they belong to him, and he can give them to whoever he wants. That's why all of our world leaders are liars. What is mankind's greatest accomplishment? Putting a man on the moon. It's a lie. It's very simple to prove. I have, 4 concrete proofs that individually would prove by themselves we didn't go to the moon. Let's start with the simplest one, which is today. With 55 years better technology, the farthest that NASA can send an astronaut into space is 1,000th the distance to the moon. So what they're claiming is that back with 1960s technology, before microwave ovens, before cell phones, when all of NASA computers combined had 1/1,000,000th the computing power of a cell phone, they sent astronauts ahead of schedule on the first attempt 1,000 times farther than they can send them today with 5 decades better technology. So what they're actually claiming is that for the first time in recorded history, technology was greater in the past than in the future. Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic in 1927. Imagine 55 years later, no one can fly across the Atlantic.
Or
And
they say it's
instead of
too
being able,
expensive. It's just too expensive,
yeah,
is what they
well,
say.
that's just not the case. The government doesn't care about expenses at all. Otherwise, they wouldn't be sending all that money, on wars and everything. So imagine at 55 years after Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic, not only can no one fly across the Atlantic, but they can only fly 1,000th as far. It's like, well, what's going on here? You see, it's impossible to have greater technology in the past and in the future. When the first atomic bomb was blown up, 10 years later, atomic bombs were 1,000 times more powerful. So if they could go to the moon on the first attempt with 1 millionth the computing power of a cell phone, they would have been on Mars 10 years later. We'd be in another solar system by now, and there'd be bases all over the moon, like there are at the South Pole. Right? 100-mile-per-hour winds, 100 degrees below zero, and yet there are bases there because it can be done, maybe barely. So if it could be done, there would be bases there. In fact, just to reach the South Pole took 6 attempts. It killed 5 crews first. Finally, the 6th time they made it to the South Pole, and yet somehow they did it on the first attempt. They can drive cars and play golf on the moon.
In
And
an untested aircraft, by the way. In an
right.
untested aircraft.
And at 55 years later, the best they can do is have mannequins orbit the moon. Now, my book, Moon Man, goes into all this detail that's not in A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, because I had sources. I have a millionaire backing me, okay? I interviewed the widow and the son of the man who is going to be the first man to walk on the moon. He was beloved by the public and the media. And according to his widow, who I interviewed for 4 hours, and according to his son, who's a 747 pilot, who I interviewed for 3 hours, he was murdered by the CIA because he would not cooperate with fraud in the Apollo program.
That's correct. Can we slow that
wife,
story down for people that don't know about Grisham? Can you explain what was supposed to happen? Because a lot of people that were supposed to go to the moon ended up dead in very mysterious circumstances. People that were supposed to testify about the death ended up dead in mysterious circumstances. So let's slow that down for my listeners in case this is the first time they've ever even considered that the moon landing didn't happen.
Yeah. So basically, Gus Grissom was the most beloved astronaut because he had an accident where his space capsule sank to the bottom of the ocean, and he confessed at the press conference he had all of these rolls of nickels in his pocket to give to his son, to give to his schoolmates, to say this nickel has been in outer space. And when he started sinking with that extra weight, he said, maybe that wasn't such a brilliant idea. The media laughed. And then someone asked him, were you afraid? And he said, of course I was afraid. And everyone said, this guy's real. They said he's going to be the first man to walk on the moon. He was preparing congressional reports and giving them to senators that were taken from his home by the CIA before they even informed his widow that he was dead. On January 26, 1967, he came home and told his wife the following, who told me, "Hun, for some strange reason, the CIA is all over the launch pad today. I've never seen the CIA here in 3 years. Why did they show up today to inspect the equipment? The next day he's dead from faulty equipment." Days earlier, he held a press conference without permission. And he took a bunch of reporters up to the top of the rocket where he affixed a lemon the size of a grapefruit to the top of the rocket, calling it publicly a piece of junk. In fact, seconds before he burned alive, murdered by the CIA, his widow's opinion, not mine, they couldn't even get a wired intercom to work between 2 buildings. He says, how are we going to go to the moon? He says they're not fixing anything because they knew they were going to fake it and hadn't told the astronauts yet. It was faked a year later. So here's the point. Our country was formed, right, not by the Constitution, by the Declaration of Independence against the tyranny of King George, right? Because he was an obstacle to the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. What's the first one? Life. The federal government is murdering their own people. Does anybody care? It'd be one thing if they faked the moon landing and didn't kill anybody. But that's not the case. You see, they're so afraid for the truth about this to come out. I showed 2 NBC News directors the video that you can see on the homepage of Sabrell.com of them faking being halfway to the moon with a 1-foot model, the thing that convinced me and my critics they're faking part of the mission, which they would never have to do if they really went. One of them refused to broadcast it. He said, this will cause a civil war. I'm not going to go down in history as the man that caused the Civil War. And the other one, 10 years later, agreed to broadcast it, flew me to New York, put me up in the Waldorf Astoria. They said, we're going to break the story nationwide. They get a call from the federal government telling them, don't embarrass us, cancel the broadcast. And they did. All these podcasters who claim that they're anti-deep state are defending the moon landing. They're defending people who are accessory to murderers. Right? A great broadcaster, Glenn Beck, who's sincere but sincerely wrong, has me on for 15 minutes in audio and has on Charles Duke an hour on in video. An Apollo astronaut who has the audacity to claim to be a Christian, right? Lying, assuming that people are going to believe him if he calls himself a Christian. When because of his participation in the moon landing fraud, many people were killed. My eyewitness was Cyrus Eugene Akers. He was the chief of security at Cannon Air Force Base. And as he was dying, fearing God's judgment, and as we know, if we renounce our sin and confess, we're forgiven. The first thing out of his mouth, chief of security at Cannon Air Force Base, he says, I'm a murderer. I killed somebody. His son says, who? He says, a coworker at Cannon Air Force Base. His son brings in the military police to investigate, to give the family closure. Maybe they just dumped his body somewhere, said he disappeared. Then they asked him why. Why did you kill him? He said to cover up landing fraud. We both eyewitnessed it in 1968 at Cannon Air Force Base. President Johnson was there the first of 3 days of filming. My friend thought it was morally wrong. I killed him to keep it a secret. Please forgive me. I have outlined the best 4 minutes of it. It's a 4-minute clip. It's clip 9, called The Deathbed Confession. It's the son describing his father, story that he gave to him on his deathbed. And he goes into great detail about Cannon Air Force Base, how they spent weeks building the lunar set, how they did it with pulverized concrete, the security precaution, the list of 15 people who were there, how he lived right across from Cannon Air Force Base, how his dad abhorred lying. And so, his dad, why would he make this up as he's dying? I didn't put in the book, but I discussed during interviews about the homicide because the son was still alive and didn't want to be pestered by the media. He was already pestered. The White House press secretary, the United States Senate Intelligence Committee, and the FBI were involved with me in giving this guy whistleblower protection. That's how serious this was. People showed up at this guy's house in the video clip and threatened to kill him and his family if he ever spoke to me again about his father participating in the fake moon landing. So we got as honorable people as we could in the government protecting this guy. So this is his testimony, 4 minutes of it with the time code there. That, to me, it's just one more, piece of evidence. But to everybody else, they're like, wow, when they see it. And, it's that reaction. That's what I saw. When you saw the window shot, you're like, oh, my gosh. And that's with me. I'm like, oh, my gosh. They really did fake the moon landing. I called up Bill Casey, my source at NASA, immediately. And we were already on scrambled telephones. We have a millionaire backing us. And our phone call is interrupted. And I'm like, I've got this proof. You got to, don't sleep where you slept last night. Then I go to church to get, feedback from the elders. What do? They say, drive like a bat out of hell to CNN. On the way to CNN, I'm followed. My car disabled. I have to take a cab, and then I'm illegally arrested and drugged. All that happened the day I found the tape.
Well, let's get into it. Let's actually watch that clip of his testimony.
I've never known my dad to lie. To get caught lying was worse than whatever it was you did to begin with. I remember going to school with long sleeve shirts on to hide the purple welts. You did not lie in our house, that's for sure. Dad had a really bad attitude towards lying. Excuse me again. Okay, anyway, this is the story that my dad told me on his deathbed. Project Slam Dunk was the name of this. President Johnson in 1968, okay, in Cannon Air Force Base in 1968, he said by the time he got there, that there was already 2 large hangars that were connected. There was hundreds of dump trucks that came in and dumped sand and stone, and cement powder was powdered over the top of all that to make it look like a lunar landscape. They had men that fashioned it into a lunar landscape, he said. Okay, I've never known my dad to lie, so this all took me by surprise. You know, what's that all about? So anyway, he said that in front of the airplane hangars was pole framing with large canvas tents that was concealing the inside of the staging area. Inside the staging area, on flatbed trucks, was uncrated the lunar lander that was reassembled back inside the hangars. All of the walls were painted flat black, and the ceilings as well. He was sworn to secrecy by the NSA, and they would put him in prison for breaking that oath. When Dad saw the moon landing on TV, he cried. He said he knew that what he had witnessed on TV was exactly what they recorded in that hangar. There was no reason for them to go flying around and everything. They had detailed high-definition photos of the landing area. There was no reason for them to go flying around to a different landing area that almost exhausted their fuel, except for drama, because everything had gone so smoothly. Nothing, you know, so it had to be something. Anyway, Dad was one of 3 guards that guarded the inside of the front entrance. There was a list of 15 people who could enter. No one else was allowed by order of President Johnson. And here is that list, and I gave it to Bart Cybrell as well. And he checked out a lot of these names, and he says he can verify a lot of these people and what they do. And I come across a couple myself. Anyway, President Johnson, Neil Armstrong, Edwin Aldrin, Wernher von Braun, Robert Emenegger, Gene Kranz, James Webb, Joe Kerwin, Dr. Thomas Paine, Glenn Looney, Dr. Christopher Kraft, Dr. James Van Allen, General Trudeau, Lieutenant Colonel Donald Simon, and Grant Norrie.
Wow, wow, wow. I mean, what is the incentive for someone to put their lives at risk to say that their father told them something on their dying bed, you know?
Yeah, and he confessed he murdered a coworker. So all these
Yeah.
people, you know, astronauts who are alive, you know, not only did they lie about it, they contributed to the death, the murder of innocent people, including the crew of Apollo 1 and that coworker at Cannon Air Force Base, Don Barron, and who knows who else. You know, when I got illegally abducted at the back door of CNN trying to get this classified footage into a reporter friend there, a lawyer who I think wanted to have a CNN address. The only way he could afford it was a back alley door. Well, he happened to step out right as I was being illegally arrested. I said, "Look, I'm a journalist with NBC. Here are my credentials. You see these huge videotapes? They're Betacam. I have proof they didn't go to the moon. I'm being illegally arrested." And of course, the government people were freaking out. He got out his notepad. Had that not happened, maybe I wouldn't be having this conversation today, because maybe they would have gotten rid of me too.
All right, guys, if you're feeling stressed about giving your family a memorable holiday, you are not alone. Prices remain higher than ever, and a lot of Americans are maxing out their credit cards. Now is the perfect time to take control of your finances and pay off that debt. If you're a homeowner, American Financing can help you unlock the equity in your home, and you can start saving right now. Their customers save on average $800 a month. Just imagine what that could mean for your family. Plus, if you act now, you could even delay 2 mortgage payments, giving you extra cash for the season. And wouldn't it be nice to start off the new year without that debt and those monthly minimum payments? It costs absolutely nothing to find out how much you could be saving. Christmas is going to be here before you know it, so call one of American Financing's salary-based mortgage consultants today. You You can call now at 800-795-1210. Again, that number is 800-795-1210, or visit americanfinancing.net/Owens. Again, that's americanfinancing.net/Owens. Man, my
This is in the
audience, I
book.
mean,
Yeah.
is going to be
That-
not so surprised, because I've been telling them to read this book called Chaos. The 60s was quite a period. They were just murdering people in plain daylight, whether it was JFK being shot because he didn't want to go along with the war overseas, and then placing in LBJ, who was just an absolutely evil man who, in my opinion, played a role in the assassination of JFK, knew about it without question, because he knew that he was going to become the president. And so what you're speaking about, my audience is aware of the MK Ultra program. They're aware of what the CIA is capable of training people to kill and trying to brainwash people to kill. So this doesn't come as a surprise to us. The CIA murdering is something that my audience very much understands. There was another piece of this. There was a guy, and I'm not sure if he was due to give congressional testimony, who got into a bizarre car accident. His entire family got killed, and I'm just sort of blanking on who that was and how
his
it
name
related
was
to the moon
Ronald
landings.
Barron.
Ronald Barron?
Was inspector at Rocketdyne, I believe, and because he did such a good job pointing out this equipment is a piece of junk, they fired him. Congress said that's the guy we want to report on Apollo. When the murders happened, they wanted him all the more, and they basically killed him on the way to report for the second time for Congress that the moon mission is 10 years or more away from going to the moon. I mean, they can't go to the moon today. They can only go 1,000th the distance. So yes, they faked it. And here's what people need to have an epiphany.
And he was killed in a car accident, right? Him and his wife,
Well,
is that correct?
it appears that he was killed in a car accident. What they probably did is killed him elsewhere. They put his car on a train track to destroy the forensic evidence because they didn't have DNA capability at the time. But people need to understand this. According to Bobby Kennedy Jr., who has more access to the JFK files than Oliver Stone does, his opinion, which is he's the expert, not me, so it's my opinion, his uncle, President Kennedy, was absolutely 100% killed by the CIA. I guess that's election interference, isn't it? And then Robert McNamara, defense secretary during the Vietnam War, said, look, the public was against entering the war. We said we need some sort of Pearl Harbor type of thing. Well, the day before Pearl Harbor, 90% of Americans were against World War II. The day after, they wanted to get even. So they created a fake attack by the North Vietnamese against an American ship in the Gulf of Tonkin. Congress passed a law, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. He said on his deathbed, it never happened. We made it up. Congress passed a law. Shouldn't the CIA get a reprimand, if not be completely shut down forever? Right? So my point is, the federal government is willing to kill their own president. They're willing to start a war that needlessly killed 58,220 of their own people. So I don't think they're going to have a problem faking a video image on the moon. You see? And if you want to show people, I know I sent to Mark this still picture. You can prove. Now, first we proved with logic. You can't have 1,000 times greater space traveling technology in 1969 than you can today. There you go. It's over. They didn't go. If you need more proof than that, bring up the picture, a still picture. I'm a filmmaker. Like I said, my job is to make fake scenes look real. And if we show this picture, you'll see that in sunlight, shadows are parallel. Go outside on a sunny day, 2 trees, 2 telephone poles, 2 people standing in your front yard or parking lot at lunch. And you'll see it's impossible mathematically for the shadows to intersect. You see that on the left-hand side? It's impossible. Then here's a picture they claim is on the moon, that the astronaut shadow is going at 12 o'clock and a shadow from a rock is going at 9 o'clock. Now, that's a 90-degree difference from objects 5 feet apart. This is all the proof that you need that the moon missions were taken on Earth, because it's supposed to be 20 times brighter than a desert on Earth because there's no atmosphere. So you don't need light. That's proof that light is really close, and it's an electrical light. That means
well,
they
it's
didn't
interesting
go.
that you speak about this because then you go, what is the purpose? And you also see this element of money laundering at a time when they wanted to go to war. Money just disappearing because people were believing that we were having these amazing feats accomplished in outer space. And it's interesting to see, and I did this, looking into the companies, who received that deal with the government. Hey, we'll give you all the money. You create the spacesuits. Hey, we'll give you all the money. You create the spaceship. And they were producing pieces of crap. I mean, one company literally made like nylon spandex and then they're like, yeah, no, you'll be good enough. No basis in science or anything. Like, you can make our spacesuits, and you can see the images of women sewing the spacesuits. And then you learn about how many degrees it was on the surface of the moon. And you're telling me this material was able to endure this many degrees during the daytime and Fahrenheit, and then dropping below, like, what was it, like a negative 200 degrees at nighttime. And somehow this fabric worked, and the film was not corrupted during that heat, film being in the camera. And so the more that you look into the moon landing and seriously look at the pieces that have been written by people who are just telling you this just never happened. I mean, I'm a photographer. Show me the camera that can survive these temperatures, and make it all the way back into the atmosphere. And then you run it and the pictures are perfect. It is a bit cartoonish. It's almost cartoonish. I mean, one guy likens it. He says it's like the Easter Bunny for adults. People that are holding on to this myth of the moon
pretty
landing.
much what it is. I've been using the Santa Claus analogy, and I don't mean to be insulting, but the moon landing really is Santa Claus for adults. People aren't facing facts. No matter what proof you present, they deny it. They say we win anyway. I talked to a college professor, Candace, at one of the most prestigious universities in America. He teaches aerospace. I said, well, what if Apollo astronaut on national TV confessed that the moon landings were fake, shot at Cannon Air Force Base, just like Bart says? He said, I'd still think he walked on the moon anyway. Now, what happened in November is pretty interesting. They have the NAB convention in Vegas every year for broadcasters, TV, microphones, and whatnot. Then they have auto conventions where you can drive the car that gets 150 miles a gallon that never hits the market. Well, they had an AI convention in Moscow in November. And they had the most advanced AI, not available to the public, but available for the VIPs to play around with for 3 days. Vladimir Putin was there. It was Google's neural network, multiple AIs hooked up together. One team had it write a symphony. I think it took about a second and a half. Another had it write a novel based on these plot points, took about a second and a half. And then the computer has this deep fake detector that has never been wrong. You can feed it a video of Trump or a video of Biden. It'll tell you in 1 second whether it's real or deep fake. So someone fed it pictures from the lunar surface from the unmanned Chinese probes from 2014. It said they're real. Then they fed them Apollo picture after Apollo picture after Apollo picture. It said all of them are fake.
Wow.
It said the smartest AI in the world just said the moon landings are fake. And if you try to find the original link, believe it or not, there's a screenshot of it at Sabrel.com. It says if you proceed, all the data on your computer will be stolen and you'll be associated with child pornography. That's how desperate they are to bury this. Now, let me answer the two number one, defenses of the moon landing. Well, it involved hundreds of thousands of people, and that many people can't keep a secret. Well, you got to look a little deeper than that. Okay? The atomic bomb, that was the biggest secret of World War II. It involved 129,500 people, and only 8 people knew what they were building. Imagine Bank of America has 500,000 tellers. Do you think a bank teller and what the CEO know about corruption in the bank are identical? They're completely different. Eugene Kranz, who I've spoken to personally, flight director at Apollo, said, someone in the command center at Houston Control can tell no difference whatsoever between a simulation flight and a real flight. It's just a bunch of numbers going by on a screen. If they can't tell the difference, then I certainly can't tell the difference as a 4-year-old, right? And you can't tell the difference 20 years later after the fact. You see?
I actually think it's the opposite. I think the bigger the lie, the easier it is for people to believe it, because they can't comprehend that someone would tell a lie that big. So if you're going to tell a lie, tell a whopper, because they go, okay, why would a person tell us you'd have to be evil to tell a lie this big, right? And most people want to believe in this fundamental goodness. They want to believe that, the governments are fundamentally good, so they wouldn't lie this big. So I've always said, now we're in post-COVID society. So now they realize governments lie big. Like, they go big in order to accomplish what they want to get accomplished. And so I think the scales are definitely falling from people's eyes, and that no longer seems to be a struggle. But what does seem to be a struggle for people is they say, oh, well, we were competing with Russia. Why would Russia, if it was fake, the first people that would have said it would have been Russia? I have a theory on that, but I'd love to hear yours.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say, Candace, because that's the really the only second argument. First, let me say, yeah, when I ask people, why will you not accept that the moon landings were fake? They said the government wouldn't lie about something that important, right? They already killed their president. They already killed 58,000 other soldiers. So faking a video image is nothing to them, right? Well, here's the fact. I have a friend who works in the command center of the Chinese Space Agency. He told me, and I have a video of it at Sabrel.com somewhere, that everybody there knows that the moon missions are fake. They're blackmailing NASA for space technology that Congress wrote a law says it's illegal to give China, but they're doing it anyway so that they will not expose the moon landing fraud. Putin was at the AI conference. I have a video on my homepage of him being shown the AI just saying the moon missions are fake. Doesn't look surprised at all. In fact, he looks scared that the truth will come out. You see, if I had a picture of a world leader with a prostitute, I could upload it to the internet and bring down that person, and then it's over. Or I could blackmail them year after year after year after year. And that's what the smarter, shrewder Soviets and Chinese are doing. Another good reason for the truth to come out. You see?
Well, so
It's
I'll tell you what my
interesting.
theory is on that.
Yeah.
I actually
Go
think
ahead.
the Russians and the Americans are coordinating with each other because everyone's forgetting about McCarthyism. What was the CIA? They got infiltrated by communists, and it was real. McCarthyism, as we learned it in our textbook, is like, oh, he was just paranoid and there were no commies. People were arrested. You had a couple that was put to death because the Rosenbergs that were put to death for being commies. America got infiltrated by communists, and they secured power in the CIA via blackmail, by the way. And this was something that JFK was aware of. He spoke about the corruption of the CIA so that he was going to, scatter it to the winds. And I believe that the communists successfully infiltrated the CIA. And if they did that, okay, if they successfully infiltrated the CIA, and this even gets into Jack Parsons because he had a very mysterious death and things that he was saying before his death were quite interesting, there would have been very easy coordination between the communists in Russia and the communists that were in our government. I think our last fight against communism was actually when JFK was president. I think that's what we've been fighting since. Marxist ideas and Marxist principles. We see this coming down the pipeline today. Well, where is it coming from? It's coming from our government. Our government is doing that. So I am of the belief that there may have been some coordination between the two and the space program, and they were aware that it was being faked, and the whole space race was actually just like communist propaganda, and what they were doing was just funneling cash. I mean, obviously, I'm just telling you like my instinct about it, or the more that I look into like the communist infiltration, but I think it's plausible. Now, China, that throws me for a loop because I can't see why China, outside of blackmail, which blackmail was a huge tool of the CIA, it still is a tool of the CIA, would be okay with it. And you're right, it is a very sophisticated system of blackmail amongst our politicians in America. And so there's no doubt that they would be doing that abroad as well.
Well, we have the federal government breaking their own laws. There's a law that says it's illegal to deceive people with television. That was done after the quiz show scandal, right? There's a law not to sell space technology to China, but they're doing that anyway. They're killing their own people. It's so odd. And the thing is, this is what the news director at NBC, who refused to broadcast it for fear it would cause a civil war, this proof that I found of them faking being halfway to the moon. But now I'm thinking maybe he's right. I didn't believe him at the time. I thought he was overreacting. But the moon landing fraud is, even though it probably killed fewer people, they say the JFK, witness list that was knocked off was like 200 people. Wow. It may have killed fewer people. Maybe 20 people were killed to keep this a secret. But it would anger the public. That's what he says. That if the truth of the moon landing fraud comes out, it will so anger the public. It would be the final thing that would bring down the corruptive system. And yet it's the very thing that some podcasters are afraid to talk about, who claim they want to bring down the corruptive system. They're not using the number one tool. This is the linchpin, the finger out of the dike to bring down the deep state, because they did fake the moon landing. And when people see that candy turn into manure rather than just changing hats on who killed JFK, I think maybe the truth will come out. Maybe we need to pray. The rebuke of the Tower of Babel is out there in the open, the
Mhm.
unfinished tower. The
Yeah.
rebuke of the Titanic, the ship that God himself cannot sink. Boy, they shouldn't have said that one. But Nixon's calling the lie second in greatness only to God making the universe. This rebuke hasn't come out yet. And I pondered spiritually, well, why is that? Imagine if there were a couple just got married, madly in love. One goes to a convention, gets, insanely drunk, has an affair. They come back. They either tell them right away and say, look, I just want to tell you the truth, divorce me if you will. Or they tell them on their 50th anniversary. Maybe there's a purpose in the delay. The longer people believe the lie, defend the lie with all of these videos, all of these speeches, all of these offensives. Some say if you are so foolish to believe the moon landing fraud, then it colors everything else that you believe. Maybe you're wrong about that. Well, maybe they need to direct that toward themselves because they
Mhm.
did fake the moon landing. So maybe if they're deceived about that, maybe other things that they believe are wrong as well. And that's the sad and amazing thing. It's not a theory that they faked the moon landing. We have all this proof that they did. It only takes an open mind. Go to
Mhm.
Sabrell.com, or maybe I could read it. There's a quote. So someone who read my book on the homepage, and he basically said, he saw me on Rogan. He always believed that the moon missions were real, but I laid it out in such simple terms. You can't have greater technology in the past and in the future, shadows intersecting at 90 degrees. Hello. We showed the clip that everyone agrees is them faking being halfway to the moon. And we have an eyewitness and we have the AI saying so. He says, now I find it absurd to believe that the moon landings are real.
Yeah, once you
And
actually look into it, and I think part of it is people only hear the one side. It happened, it happened, it happened, and so it just becomes it becomes a founding myth. It's just something that has been ingrained and you've been indoctrinated since your youth, and you've never actually challenged that because, like I said, most people go, well, what would be the point of them doing that? And also, why would all of these nations coordinate? Again, not something that people are questioning now because we realize that we're facing this globalized government, and they all seem to be coordinating to enslave the people. So people are willing to confront that plausibility. And all of a sudden, we're okay. Like obviously, there's a lot of evil stuff going on. Why do I think it's just starting now? Clearly, it started a long time ago. But there are people that are implicated in this that are still alive. And so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. First and foremost, Buzz Aldrin, of interest, was a Freemason. So they get this guy killed who was supposed to be the first person to walk on the moon in very mysterious fire after the CIA visits the campus. These are all facts, readily available facts people can look up. And then they usher in new people that are going to walk on the moon for the first time. They usher in Buzz Aldrin. He does happen to be a Freemason. He is still alive and he is still perceived as a hero. I struggle to comprehend, and maybe it's just my own spirit, but you have to be a coward or a truly devilish individual to accept like awards and applause and allow people to fawn over you for something that you never did. And that just has to live inside you. I mean, every night you go to bed and you have to know you are a fraud. And yet he has done this for years. And the only time someone questions him on that, he puts a Bible in his face, he loses his temper and punches the guy in the face. Like, how is
well,
he doing this?
well, I have a friend who met him at a party in Los Angeles when he was super drunk, and he said, he didn't go. And Buzz told me we've had private conversations that he believes in God, and that's why he didn't swear on the Bible that he walked on the moon. And he said the other day, I think he endorsed somebody for president, and then he had the audacity to say, God bless America. God is not going to bless America when its greatest accomplishment is a lie. God's not going to bless America when friends of his, Gus Grissom, Ed White, Roger Chaffee, were murdered because he cooperated. If he had protested, if Buzz had protested, maybe those people would still be alive. Maybe the coworker at Cannon Air Force Base would still be alive. So the idea that he can say, God bless America, give me a break. And, it was when I called him a coward, which is when he punched me. He didn't, that was what really pierced him, but he is. Of course, I have been too. I've been a coward, I've been a liar, I've been a thief. I work every day to do what is right and to struggle against temptation. But he is. And the reason he is because he's afraid to look bad. You see, the man
Or
who
he's scared
died.
he's going to get murdered.
No, I think he's afraid to look bad. That's
Mm.
it. It's vanity. You see, he could become my hero if he told the truth on his deathbed, just like Cyrus Eugene Akers did. He said, I'm a murderer. I have to set things right. He's afraid to look bad. He's told all of his entourage and all of his fans, he's pulled out paper clips from his closet that he claims were on the moon and sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars at Sotheby's auction, which is a fraud,
Oh.
right? You see, he's afraid to look bad. That's what you're afraid of. You know, the interesting thing about, I think it's the second chapter to the last chapter of Revelation, it lists a long type list of behaviors that will prevent you from entering eternal life. You know, immorality and stealing and drunkenness and all this. But you know what's first on the list? The cowardly. Why did all these millions of people take medicine for an illness they didn't even have? Out of fear of death. And I know 4 people who died from that medicine. They immediately had a reaction and immediately died. 4 people. Right? They were tricked. The Bible says, I think it's Hebrews chapter 4, that the devil holds mankind in slavery because of their fear of death. Why
Mhm.
are whistleblowers not coming forward? Because of their fear of death. My source, who was at Cannon Air Force Base, his son, who I confirmed this information with, days later, his house was broken into by, I guess, the CIA. He had security cameras. They knew his password. They took everything about his father, no proof. And then they came back a couple of days later and threatened to kill him and his family if he ever spoke about his father's participation in the moon landing fraud ever again. You see, there are
Wow.
all these people in the government who know the truth, who could come forward and bring it down, but they're afraid to lose their house. They're afraid to lose their car. They're afraid to lose their pension. They're afraid to lose their life. Hello, you're gonna die anyway.
All right, guys, today's show is sponsored by 7 Weeks Coffee. Now, why are they called 7 Weeks Coffee? Because at 7 weeks, a baby is the size of a coffee bean, and it's the same time that a heartbeat is clearly detected on an ultrasound. That's why they donate 10% of every sale to support pregnancy centers across the country. They've raised over $500,000 for these centers, and they have saved over 5,000 lives. Now I'm going to tell you about the coffee because you know I'm quite picky about what I put into my body. It's mold-free, pesticide-free, shade-grown, low acid, and it's organically farmed, so it checks all of the boxes. Plus, just in time for the holidays, 7 Weeks Coffee is having their biggest promotion of the year yet. You can enjoy exclusive discounts, free gifts with every order, plus a new limited edition coffee. Whether you're looking for stocking stuffers or the perfect roast, 7 Weeks Coffee will have you covered this Christmas season. Exclusively for my listeners, if you go to 7weekscoffee.com and you use code Candace, you'll get up to 25% off your order. Remember, your order will directly help support a network of over 900 pro-life organizations across the United States. It's actually incredible how many of speaking of the souvenirs brought back from the moon, were determined to be fraudulent. I mean, I think might have been in the Netherlands where they had this rock in the museum and then suddenly they realized, wait a minute, they went and tested it and this rock was from Arizona and they had it certified from the United States government, signed, everything. And they went,
Yeah.
we tested this rock and this is from Arizona. And the government was like, oopsies. It's like, guys, how much more proof do you need? I mean, even the moon rocks, they've been able to determine how many of these were completely fraudulent. And, you know, I think it ended up being like petrified wood that they sent
Yeah,
them
that's right.
and just told them it
Neil
was from the moon,
Armstrong-
which, yeah, go on.
Neil Armstrong says he personally picked up this rock, put it in his pocket, and personally delivered it to the Prime Minister of the Netherlands. They sealed it. The curator watched my movie, got curious, opened it up after midnight secretly, and it was petrified wood. And so all of this proof, basically, I hate writing nonfiction. It's so tedious. I spent 15 years writing my book, 2 years editing it. And it's interactive. There are 17 video clips that you can see for free at Sabrel.com. But if you want the book, it's in audio that I read, Kindle or print. And I back up with video clips everything that I'm saying, including a NASA employee saying that there's this huge field of radiation that surrounds the Earth that most people don't know about. It's 30,000 miles thick. Every manned mission has been well below that, except going to the moon. And the technology to go through the radiation to the moon and survive has not been invented yet.
My name is Kelly Smith, and I work on navigation and guidance for Orion. We are headed 3,600 miles above Earth, 15 times higher from the planet than the International Space Station. As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
Okay, so he just said we must solve these radiation challenges before we send people through this region of space. That means the radiation challenges have not been solved yet. They have to solve the radiation problem before they send people through this region of space, and those problems have not been resolved yet. So how did the Apollo astronauts go to the moon? When I asked this guy for the Geiger counter readings of the unmanned probe they sent into the radiation, they said that was a military secret. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. When you sent probes to the sun to find out the temperature of the sun is just nature. It's not a military secret. When they sent probes to Jupiter to find out how much helium is in Jupiter's atmosphere, that amount of helium is just nature. It's not a military secret. So why would the amount of radiation surrounding the Earth be a military secret? Because if they disclosed it, it would prove that they didn't go to the moon. The guy just said so. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
Right. I even saw that they were doing, and I'm saying this obviously, no, we're not recording, Mark, but that they were doing models in 2005 talking about how they would have to solve to get through the belt. And they were on the NASA website, they put up these proposed scenarios where they could use cinder blocks. And this is 2005. It's like, what do you mean? Why are you trying to put together scenarios to get through the Van Allen belt? You're supposed to have done this 40 years ago. And that was something that was included in the Wagging the Moon Doggy piece. And he showed the models from the NASA website, which they eventually took down because it kind of debunked that they went there the first time. Like, how are we going to get through the Van Allen belt? Grappling with that in 2005 doesn't really make sense. You should already have a solve for that. Maybe because it's God. Didn't God speaks about the firmament. Maybe that's the biblical firmament.
I don't know. You know, the Earth could be a triangle. I don't know. I don't care. Fortunately,
and neither do I.
A geography exam is not necessary to enter eternal life. The issue is not the shape of the Earth. The issue is the corruption of the United States.
No, I just mean the firmament beyond the Earth, like not being able to get past. I'm saying maybe that is the biblical firmament that you can't get past, that radiation.
That could be it exactly. Maybe that's the way God set it up, that we'll just stay here. You know, I don't know. But it's scary when you have the most powerful nation on earth faking the greatest accomplishment of mankind, and you have sincere people who are sincerely wrong defending the criminals that they abhor because they don't want to give up the glorious moon landing. It's pride. It's pride. People have to be willing to be wrong. Every chapter of my book has a quote. I read one from Carl Sagan. Here's one from Men in Black 3, right? That shows the Apollo launch. It says the bitterest truth is better than the sweetest lie. You see, we have to have that kind of heart. And then Mark Twain says it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. If a college professor is so in love, has made a god out of the moon landing, he says an Apollo astronaut confessing wouldn't deter his belief. He'd still think he walked on the moon anyway. That's what
and
there's
an element of that where the propaganda begins to seep into people's minds. We talk about this all the time, like me and my producer and my director, and you really see that there's certain things that are really aimed towards little boys and aimed towards little girls. And there's no question that like NASA being an astronaut, like as well as dinosaurs, it's like that is very much pushed on little boys from the time that they're young. And I think that men in particular struggle with even considering the plausibility that NASA may not be real, that, you know, the moon landing might not be real. And it's interesting because a former colleague of mine, we used to always debate this, like a friendly debate, Matt Walsh. And really what it came down, because I would say, Matt, you are so willing to recognize all of the corruption of government. We have these conversations all the time about government lying about COVID. I find it so strange that you won't let go of this one. And he says something, and I think it's very telling about where a lot of people are on this. He says, well, if this isn't real, then what you're saying is that the greatest feat of mankind didn't actually happen. The greatest feat of Americans isn't actually real. And what does that say about America? And I think it's that question that they're not willing to confront, because what it actually means is that, that greatness is it's fraudulent. That is the truth. Like, the greatest thing we ever did was trick the world into believing that we did something, And I do think that is hard to wrestle with.
It can go back. The country can go back to a noble country that's admirable. But the only way to do that is to confess the sin. You can't keep painting over the mold. You have to acknowledge it and get rid of it. It's odd that person thinks there'd be a conspiracy to deceive people about an illness going around the world, even though the former vice president of a certain pharmaceutical company says there wasn't a reason, for what they did. And that he believes the medicine is not good for you and that it may kill people instead. He thinks that people are willing to kill millions of people, but not fake a video image. You see how it's bonded into people's heart that the moon landings are real?
Yeah, it is embedded into your heart.
If anyone who becomes president of the United States really wants to get the public support behind them, they need to, from day one, acknowledge that the moon missions are fake, force Buzz Aldrin to confess or throw him in jail, and acknowledge who shot JFK and acknowledge who didn't from the very beginning. Start with the moon landing fraud. Start with the one that's going to get people's attention. Tell the world they did do it. Let's set things right. He'll have 90%, or she'll have 90% of the people behind them as president if they try to set things right. But you have to confess. You can't keep sweeping it under the rug, or you're complicit to that particular crime. You mentioned before that we have a list of people who were at Cannon Air Force Base. Some of them are still alive. I thought I have it here. Let's just read that list. President Johnson was on the top of the list. My source, Cyrus Eugene Akers, was the chief of security at Cannon Air Force Base. Now, every branch of the military has their intelligence special ops division, and the Army does, the Navy does, and the United States Air Force's special ops division is at Cannon Air Force Base. My guy was the chief of security, securing the most greatest secret of all time. President Johnson gave him a list. These 15 people are allowed in to observe and no one else. President Johnson, this is probably why he didn't run for re-election when he was eligible, because they were going to fake the moon landing. And who knew you would get away with that? What if he got caught? Didn't want to have anything to do with that. Neil Armstrong was there, but only as an observer. They use a double in the TV pictures. Edwin Aldrin Jr., Buzz Aldrin was there. Werner von Braun, former Nazi, who, according to the State Department, was about to be thrown in jail, but then he died, right? Robert Emenegger, never heard of this guy. This guy's a science fiction consultant for the military. He's being used by the government to trick people into believing in UFOs. This guy who goes around saying UFOs are real, well, his number one source that they're real is the Apollo astronauts told him so. So this disclosure about aliens, if they wanted to keep aliens a secret, it would be a secret. So the fact that they're disclosing it means they're trying to trick you into believing that they're aliens. Eugene Kranz, flight director, he was there. James Webb, a NASA administrator, was there. Joseph Kerwin, he was a future NASA astronaut. Thomas Paine was the NASA deputy administrator. Glenn Lunny, he was a flight director. Christopher Kraft, he was a mission control founder. James Van Allen. Okay, we have a clip at Sabrell.com, just uploaded it, where he says originally it was published in Scientific Journal 1959. He says the radiation surrounding the Earth that you have to go through to the moon is 100 times greater than a lethal dose. He was there. Arthur Trudeau was Army intelligence. A person by the name of Donald Simon, we think they're Navy intelligence. And Grete Norway, we think maybe they're CIA. Some of these people are alive. I contacted some of these people before I published the book because somebody asked me to let them know. I was about to publish their name, and that provoked my source's house being broken into and him being threatened. So I think
Wow.
there are good guy spies following the bad guy spies, and that's why they wanted me to let them know I had their name on this list, and we certainly got a reaction out of them. So I don't know. It's so sad that this is our country. I remember, Candace, like I said, I'm the fanboy, right? When I popped in that tape that said "Don't show to the public," and I'm like, that's not a 1 foot model of the Earth, is it? No, surely not. Then the lights come up, and it is. I just wept. I'm like, oh my gosh, they really did fake the moon landing.
Mm.
How sad is that? I'm a patriot. I want America to be an honorable country, and we have to confess our sins. If the CIA killed Kennedy, let's just say so. Either keep the
Mm.
CIA, reform it, or get rid of it, or do something else. If we faked the moon landing, let's just say so. Right? I'm not
Yeah.
against space travel. We should probably try to take care of every human being on Earth, make sure they have concrete floors and indoor plumbing. Surprisingly, Bill Gates doesn't go to Africa and give people plumbing and concrete floors. He gives them injections. But I'm not sure
Well,
what that's all
it's
about.
funny you bring that up because, because that was the moment for me that cracked it all open. Comprehending a lie that could be so big and so sinister for me. Where it was vaccines. I was vaccine injured. Then I started looking into vaccines, and I realized that the science behind it was completely fraudulent, and they were actually making kids sick, and doing this intentionally, knowing that the whole vaccine industry, the history that they tell you of how they stomped out polio. I mean, it is this one of the established founding myths of big pharma. We eradicated polio, and so once I came to terms with that, like how wrong I could be on something, like calling people anti-vaxxers, believing they were all crazy when in reality these people were telling the truth. I then came to terms with, I think it humbled me. I had humility. I was willing to, even if I arrived at a different conclusion, I will listen to something that I think is crazy. Like I don't believe that the earth is flat, but I wouldn't dismiss a flat earther in the way that I would have 10 years ago because of this vaccine thing. And so that humility allowed me in many ways to just open my mind. And sometimes you'll hear stuff, you look into it and you go, no, I still think that's pretty crazy. But the moon landing was one where I always felt it was not right. And then I looked into it and I was like, no, this just actually didn't happen. Like that was not even something that was a struggle for me to get there. And then comprehending really this era of C.S. Lewis type scientism that we're in, where really what they're doing is establishing a church, a faith. Science has now become a faith. It is not a true science. And, it's just believe, trust the experts, trust NASA, trust this. And to the point where we're now at a place where people won't believe their own eyes. Like you said, even if you showed him how they faked it, he's like, I still wouldn't believe it. I'm so committed into this in my heart to this founding myth that I'm not willing to undo it. That's incredible. That really tells you the success of modern psychology. Them recognizing that if you turn something into a movie, if you do the movie Apollo 13 and you get people crying in a theater and you teach them in the classroom from the time they're young and you sell them spaceships and T-shirts that say NASA and also the Challenger thing, looking into that is crazy. That also seems to be a sort of weird thing that happened, but you get everyone to watch these moments. I mean, you're talking about mass scale propaganda, which has been studied by the CIA for a very long time. And I have no doubt in my mind that the moon landing hoax was a major piece of that, especially when you look into everything that they were up to in the 60s. I mean, MK Ultra, Charles Manson, there was just too much crazy stuff going on with the CIA in the 60s for me to believe. But the one thing they really kept above bar was the NASA program. The Apollo program was above board. But yeah, they were drugging everybody with LSD, faking the Charles Manson thing involved in there, but they were above board on the moon landings. Absolutely not.
Yeah,
That
there's
doesn't
no
make any sense.
eyewitnesses. People don't realize that. No eyewitnesses, only a TV picture controlled by the federal government, and everyone wanting to believe the lie. Richard Nixon said the
Wait,
greatest
no
threat.
one was there for takeoff, like in person?
Well, no, for takeoff, yeah, but I'm talking about actually what they claim they did is on the moon. They had to go up, to at least, do as much as they could. They just never left Earth orbit. That's why 55 years later, they still can't leave Earth orbit. That's why there's mannequins orbiting the moon. They said in 2014 and 2018, they'd have people orbiting the moon, 100% behind schedule. Years later, they have mannequins orbiting the moon because they would be killed because of the radiation. Their own employee says so. It's one of the clips at Sabrel.com. And it just boggles the mind. It's right there. He says the technology to survive the trip to the moon has not been invented yet. And Nixon said the greatest threat in 1969 to America wasn't China, wasn't Russia. It was people protesting the federal government over the Vietnam War. So they gave him a pep rally. The code name, according to my source, was personally created by President Johnson. He called the fake moon landing code name Slam Dunk, because if you fake the moon mission, you can have a 100% guarantee of its success. So it's a slam dunk. And so they guaranteed it. They gave everybody something to cheer about, something to unite the country. And everyone wanted to believe it, and everyone assumed that the government would tell the truth. And yet it was so easy. If a controller in the command center can't tell the difference between a real flight and a simulated one, and there's no independent press coverage, and it's that fuzzy little picture, why did Gilligan's Island go from black and white to color in 1964, but the most technologically advanced organization, NASA, has a fuzzy black and white picture on the moon? I wonder why. They don't have as sharp as picture as Gilligan's Island. I wonder why. Because it would reveal the fake sets. In fact, I think it was Ron Howard's grandfather warned him that the moon landings were fake, but he wouldn't listen. He grew up, with Apollo toys. He wanted to make this IMAX movie showing all the Apollo footage at the highest resolution possible. So he goes to NASA. They say, well, give us a couple of days. And 2 days later, they say we accidentally lost and erased all of the original videotapes right before he transferred them to HD. Then there's a clip you can see on my website of NASA's own employee saying they intentionally destroyed all of the Apollo equipment, all of the schematics, all of the hardware, all of the engineering, all of the original telemetry, all of the original videotapes. Now, if Bill Gates spent an equivalent of $250 billion to build the first supercomputer and it worked great, do you really think he would throw it in a furnace and all the diagrams on how it got built? No. Maybe they should have done that with the atomic bomb, but like I said, 10 years later, they're 1,000 times more powerful. So why would they destroy everything? If you really went to the moon and really spent an equivalent of $250 billion, the last thing you would do would be to destroy all the documentation. But that's exactly what they did, which is only what you would do if you perpetrated a fraud. So really, indirectly, the fact that they destroyed evidence is proof of the fraud, because if you really went, you would never do that. You see that?
Christmas is just around the corner, and if you're still searching for the perfect gift or you just want to treat yourself, Nimi Skincare has something special to share this holiday season. Right now, use code SANTA10 at NimiSkincare.com and you'll get 10% off your Christmas order. So whether you're shopping for a loved one or you're giving your own skin some extra care, this is the perfect time to try Nimi's luxurious skincare. Nimi is more than just skincare. It's a brand that you can feel good about supporting because all their products are proudly made in the USA and they're rooted in values of faith, family, and freedom, which is a perfect match for the season of giving. Their clean, effective formulas are designed to refresh and revitalize your skin so you or your loved ones can start the new year feeling confident and rejuvenated. Nimi has everything from simple skincare routines to targeted treatments. You can create a custom bundle for an unforgettable gift, or you can take their skincare quiz and it will guide you to the perfect option for anyone that's on your list. So don't wait, use code SANTA10 today. And again, you'll get 10% off your order at NimiSkincare.com. Make this Christmas extra special with a gift that truly cares for your skin and aligns with your values. That's promo code SANTA10 at NimiSkincare.com. Yes, it's incredible how much of the evidence accidentally got lost, or they say it accidentally got lost, but in reality it was destroyed. And it makes entirely no sense. Like you said, they would have been so keen to preserve every piece of that because they made human history. I mean, they were next to God according to them. And you're right, that is blasphemous. I do want to ask you as a final really big question here, because I've grappled with this myself and I don't know where I land at, because I so am committed to the idea that the moon landings are completely fraudulent and that it's been a hoax. And we will direct people to your website, and I will also give them the article that I read, which was laugh out loud funny. It was called Wagging the Moon Doggy, and it essentially says the exact same thing, that, they wanted to go to war, they needed a distraction, people were upset, and it gave them a distraction. And they even wanted to pretend they got stuck on Apollo 13, because then they were super distracted when they stopped being interested in the moon landings. But Elon Musk, let's talk about Elon Musk, okay? Because, I think what he did with X is heroic, freeing the bird, saving speech, in my opinion. I think he's brilliant. I struggle to believe that someone with his mind would believe the moon landing. I just struggle to believe that. Like, he knows he's done these space missions. He knows that he has not been able to get past the Van Allen belt, or that a manned mission. Like, he could not do that himself if he wanted to, a manned mission beyond the Van Allen belt. And yet he says, of course the moon landing happens. What do you make of that?
I've never seen a clip of him saying, "Of course."
He tweeted it. I saw it, and he responded to my.
Well,
I think it was my buddy Matt Walsh, and
okay,
he was
well,
like,
let
"Of course
me
it
tell you
happened."
what I saw is him saying the Apollo missions are a historical anomaly, meaning they're out of place logically according to technological development. The fact is, he's a billionaire who has his dreams, and he can spend billions of dollars buying X, losing money, buying rockets, whatever. He has dreams he wants to fulfill. Why not? If I were a billionaire, I'd make all my feature films I want to make. The fact is, he needs the federal government's cooperation.
Right.
He needs NASA's cooperation to
That's what I
do
think.
what he wants to do. So he's not going to rock the boat.
Mm.
He said it's a historical anomaly. I know that he knows that they didn't go to the moon. I know he has a copy of my book. So he knows we
in the
didn't go,
back,
but
he used to in the
playing
past
ball.
say more, but now it seems like he's kind of towing the
Well,
line a bit more.
here's what he actually did say, okay? He said in order to go to the moon, they're going to have to make a minimum of 8 fuel trips first. Okay, so how did they go in one rocket? One of the things we disclose in my book is the original findings of von Braun. He says the idea to go to the moon in one rocket is ludicrous. It will take a minimum of 3 rockets, each weighing 800,000 tons. The Saturn V only weighed 2,500 tons, not
And the maker of Saturn
800,000 tons.
V also said
And
that
there
it
would
couldn't
have
get
to be
them to the
3 of
moon.
them. There's a TED Talk. The guy says in order to go to the moon, it may take up to 24 fuel trips. We don't know. So the rocket could not leave Earth orbit. Von Braun said so in his own writing. He said these numbers are mathematically irrefutable. I have a video at Sabrell.com of him saying a space station has to be built first, and you have to ferry up fuel. Okay, I guess to not throw him in jail in 1969, which they're about to do years later, they blackmailed him into participating in the fraud. So why is it, as things get more efficient, we now need 8 to 24 rocket fuel trips to go to the moon when we can do it with 1969 technology in one rocket? You see that? So he said 2 statements that indicate that he knows better. He says it's an historical anomaly, meaning that technology is out of place sequentially, which it is, because they can only go 1,000th the distance to the moon today with 5 decades better technology. And then he said you're going to need 8 fuel trips first. You didn't need that with the 1960s equipment. What's the problem here? You see? So he knows that they didn't go to the moon, and he's trying to play ball because he wants, to have NASA's.
Yeah, he's got
and the
government
federal
contracts now, and I think that's
cooperation.
it. Because you're right. If you look in the past, he kind of drops these little nuggets to make it seem like he kind of knows the moon landing didn't happen. Then you fast forward to like the last 2 years, and I'm pretty sure he tweeted like, "I don't understand people who don't think the moon landing didn't happen," or something like that. And it just seems like he's kind of towing a different line now, which is fine. I just wanted to bring it to your attention because, I think people have looked to him as someone who's really just willing to stand up to the deep state because of what he did with X. And now they're starting to ask questions like, did even he kind of go, okay, I'm tired of fighting these dragons and just like, I've just got to give them one thing and just say, okay, I will kowtow to the moon landing narrative. I hope not, but I am totally on board with you. And we are going to obviously show all of the clips that you spoke about today throughout this episode. We'll be going back and editing it in. If you guys are watching that, that's why you may see some clips being jumped in. And I just want people to know where they can go. You've mentioned the website a few times. If you could just spell it so that they know where they can go to look at these clips and to find your documentary.
Yeah, just my last name.com, S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, REL, Sabrell.com. My 15 years of writing is in this book, which contains probably 30 years of research. It's an interactive book. It's an audio that I read myself, Kindle or print, and all the links you can see right now at Sabrell.com.
Well, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. If you are listening to this, this is the power of thinking. And like I say, what I always want to do is give you the permission to think about these topics that are deemed otherwise obscure. If you're just opening your mind to this plausibility, do your own research, conduct your own research, bend your mind like a pretzel. You may come to the conclusion like, no, this absolutely did not happen like I did. Or you may say, you know what, Candace, I heard you. It was an interesting episode, and I still think they did happen. That's okay. Let's bring back the ability to think and the ability to think critically on your own, independently, and to come to your own conclusions. I remain a moon landing did not happen stan. I'm not going to ever change my mind on that. So right ahead, write your articles, journalists. Call me a total kook for not believing in your settled science. You get way too angry about it for me to believe a single shred of what you were saying. Take that, Bill Maher. We'll see you guys tomorrow.